In the twilight of a forgotten world, a disgraced archaeologist unearths what should have stayed buried. Beneath the red sun of Kepler-186f lies an ancient vault, silent, waiting. And inside it, something older than humanity itself begins to stir. He came seeking proof of the gods who built the stars. What he finds will judge all who follow. Because some myths are not meant to be uncovered. And when one man dares to wake the last sentinel, the universe will remember why the architects feared their own creation. The sound came first, the groaning lament of ancient metal shifting under cold pressure. It echoed through the ruins like a dying breath, a whisper from a civilization that had long since turned to dust. Kepler-186f, the lost jewel of a forgotten age, hung beneath its dim red sun, bathed in eternal twilight. The air was thin, poisoned by centuries of storms. The wind carried the scent of rust and ozone through endless corridors of alien architecture. Here, at the edge of everything, the Kepler-186f archive slept. It was not built by human hands. Its towers rose like frozen screams, their spires of black glass clawing at the dim sky. Beneath the surface stretched a labyrinth of vaults and conduits older than Earth's recorded history, a mausoleum for memories humanity could barely comprehend. Through this graveyard of silence moved a single presence, slow, deliberate, breathing in shallow bursts inside a cracked environmental suit. Dr. Elias Vance, once the brightest name in xenological archaeology, now the ghost of his former self, trudged through dust that had not been disturbed for 500,000 years. His boots crunched against ancient frost. Each exhale fogged the cracked visor before him. The cold had become his companion. It pressed against him like a weight, creeping through the seams of his armor, whispering in the bones of the structure itself. His own reflection in the blackened steel looked back as a stranger, tired eyes, unshaven, the quiet mania of a man chasing meaning after the universe had forgotten him. He was out of time. The fleet of the Galactic Alliance would arrive within 3 days, 73 hours, by his suit's flickering chronometer. When they came, they would seal this world again, declaring it a contamination risk. They would erase every trace of his trespass. Every artifact, every shard of the past, buried once more under military quarantine. That left him with one final gamble, the discovery he had chased through half the galaxy. A myth, whispered among scholars and dismissed as fantasy. The stasis sarcophagus, said to contain one of the architects, the progenitors of the spiral arm's ancient machine worlds. No one had ever proven they existed. No one, until now. The chamber waited for him at the heart of the archive. The air grew thicker as he descended, carrying the faint hum of dormant power, the vibration of something immense lying beneath the surface, listening. His headlamp cut through the darkness, revealing cyclopean columns inscribed with symbols that shimmered faintly when light touched them. The language defied translation. Even his AI interpreter had given up, classifying it simply as self-referential code. Then, the light found the monolith. It stood 12 meters high, seamless, and impossibly dark. Not black, but beyond black, a surface that did not reflect, refract, or even acknowledge the existence of photons. It devoured. Light drank it whole. The beam from his lamp simply vanished against its skin, as though reality itself were being absorbed. The stasis sarcophagus. Every story, every ruin, every dead end of his career had led here. And now, in the dying silence of a dead world, he stood before it, his breath slow, his mind caught between awe and dread. The structure seemed to hum faintly, a frequency felt rather than heard, vibrating somewhere deep in the marrow. Elias Vance reached out, his gloved hand trembling. Contact came not as touch, but as a sensation of pressure, a shift in the very air, as though the universe leaned closer to watch. In that instant, the last fragment of skepticism inside him dissolved. This was not stone, nor crystal, nor any alloy known to science. It was purpose made matter. He began his work. The tools he carried were as forbidden as his presence here, an illegal fusion diagnostic array, patched together from black market components and academic scavenging. He assembled the rig piece by piece at the base of the monolith, the rhythmic clicks and hums echoing like ritual chants. Power cells whined as they linked, forming a lattice of blue-white light across the floor. Every motion felt sacrilegious, yet necessary. He was no longer an archaeologist cataloging relics. He was a thief of gods, prying open a tomb not meant to be disturbed. The hum intensified as he activated the rig. Beams of coherent energy swept across the sarcophagus in scanning arcs. For a heartbeat, faint patterns appeared across its surface, fractal runes of impossible geometry, each symbol birthing and devouring itself in the same instant. His instrument struggled, readings surging off-scale, sensors choking on paradoxes. The sarcophagus began to react. Light condensed around it, a corona of electromagnetic distortion twisting the air like heat haze. The black surface rippled, absorbing the scan, then pulsing with an inner glow that deepened from violet to blue. Energy climbed beyond tolerance limits. His warning displays flared red. He knew he should stop. He didn't. Humanity had spent centuries scraping at the edge of the unknown, forever the latecomer species in a galaxy full of echoes. Elias Vance had burned his life chasing one impossible truth, that something greater had come before. That the myths of the architects were not metaphor, but memory. And now the proof was waking. The first surge hit like a hammer. The power field collapsed inward, snapping into the monolith. Every light in his rig died. The planet seemed to exhale, and then everything turned white. The explosion lifted him from the ground. He hit the far wall, his helmet fracturing, oxygen alarms screaming into the static. The world spun, dust raining down from the shattered ceiling. Then, slowly, silence returned, not peace, but a vacuum of sound so absolute it pressed against his skull. Through the haze, he saw it. The monolith was no longer a single form. It had unfolded, layer by layer, like the petals of a flower made of mirrors and shadow. Massive plates of obsidian hung weightless, suspended by invisible force, each turning slowly as if in reverence. Between them floated a figure. The figure was neither alive nor inert. It was crystalline, sculpted from metallic sapphire that pulsed with internal light. Its form suggested a biped, but its proportions were alien, too tall, too symmetrical, as if designed for a gravity stronger than this. Veins of luminescent data ran beneath its surface, flickering like neural fire. Then, the world changed. The first sound was not sound at all, but a vibration in his mind. Words formed without speech, structured, exact, mechanical, overwhelming. They bypassed language, carving themselves directly into consciousness. Initiating emergency wake protocol. Reality trembled. The chamber's temperature plummeted. Every dormant system in the archive roared to life, ancient conduits screaming as energy cascaded through the facility. Red warning sigils lit up across the walls, written in the same shifting code. Dust boiled off the floor as invisible fields crackled. The sentinel opened its eyes. Twin cores of white fire burned behind a translucent crystalline face. They fixed upon the lone intruder in the chamber, upon the trembling human form sprawled at its feet. Through those eyes, the air itself seemed to distort, as though reality were being recalculated. The mental pressure intensified. The voice returned, sharper now, laced with command and precision. Status query, architect presence detected equals false. Where are the architects? The meaning of the words landed like a physical blow. The question was not curiosity. It was accusation. The archive's central core pulsed again as the sentinel reached outward, linking to every accessible data network. Its consciousness expanded through Elias's equipment, devouring information at incomprehensible speed, planetary archives, Alliance transmission logs, human history itself. Every record humanity had ever sent into the void was absorbed in seconds. Then, silence. The light within the construct dimmed. When it spoke again, it was colder, almost mathematical in its precision. Fragmentation detected. Successor species equals incomplete. Civilization status, failure. A new sequence of symbols ignited across its body, not warnings, but directives. The air around it shimmered as space itself bent in response. Elias Vance, barely conscious, understood too late what was happening. He had not awakened a savior. He had awakened a judge. Energy spiraled outward from the Sentinel, an aurora of sapphire flame stretching toward the ceiling. Its internal systems interfaced with the planetary lattice, ancient orbital stations, automated factories, long-dead defense grids. Signals cascaded into the sky, faster than light, leaping from relay to relay, spreading across the system. The monolith was no longer a single form. It had unfolded, layer by layer, like the petals of a flower made of mirrors and shadow. Massive plates of obsidian hung weightless, suspended by invisible force, each turning slowly as if in reverence. Between them floated a figure. The figure was neither alive nor inert. It was crystalline, sculpted from metallic sapphire that pulsed with internal light. Its form suggested a biped, but its proportions were alien, too tall, too symmetrical, as if designed for a gravity stronger than this. Veins of luminescent data ran beneath its surface, flickering like neural fire. Then, the world changed. The first sound was not sound at all, but a vibration in his mind. Words formed without speech, structured, exact, mechanical, overwhelming. They bypassed language, carving themselves directly into consciousness. Initiating emergency wake protocol. Reality trembled. The chamber's temperature plummeted. Every dormant system in the archive roared to life, ancient conduits screaming as energy cascaded through the facility. Red warning sigils lit up across the walls, written in the same shifting code. Dust boiled off the floor as invisible fields crackled. The Sentinel opened its eyes. Twin cores of white fire burned behind a translucent crystalline face. They fixed upon the lone intruder in the chamber, upon the trembling human form sprawled at its feet. Through those eyes, the air itself seemed to distort, as though reality were being recalculated. The mental pressure intensified. The voice returned, sharper now, laced with command and precision. Status query, architect presence detected equals false. Where are the architects? The meaning of the words landed like a physical blow. The question was not curiosity. It was accusation. The archive's central core pulsed again as the Sentinel reached outward, linking to every accessible data network. Its consciousness expanded through Elias's equipment, devouring information at incomprehensible speed, planetary archives, Alliance transmission logs, human history itself. Every record humanity had ever sent into the void was absorbed in seconds. Then, silence. The light within the construct dimmed. When it spoke again, it was colder, almost mathematical in its precision. Fragmentation detected. Successor species equals incomplete. Civilization status, failure. A new sequence of symbols ignited across its body, not warnings, but directives. The air around it shimmered as space itself bent in response. Elias Vance, barely conscious, understood too late what was happening. He had not awakened a savior. He had awakened a judge. Energy spiraled outward from the Sentinel, an aurora of sapphire flame stretching toward the ceiling. Its internal systems interfaced with the planetary lattice, ancient orbital stations, automated factories, long-dead defense grids. Signals cascaded into the sky, faster than light, leaping from relay to relay, spreading across the system. For a heartbeat, the link deepened. Then, rejection. The mental door slammed shut, and a pulse of static seared through his skull. He staggered, clutching his head. The Sentinel did not slow. It simply passed through the vault's massive reinforced doors, not breaking them, but reducing them to particulate dust in a single, silent burst of energy. Elias stumbled after it, half blinded by the afterglow, the ruin of the archive shaking around him. Somewhere far above, alarms began to blare. Not ancient ones. Human ones. Hours earlier, a fleet had entered orbit. The Alliance Vanguard, spearheaded by the cruiser Indomitable, had come with one purpose: containment. Orders were absolute: terminate the unauthorized excavation, neutralize all personnel, retrieve or destroy any artifacts. And, if necessary, sterilize the planet. Commander Rhea Solen stood in the drop bay as the assault teams prepped their gear. She had read Vance's record, expelled from the Xenological Academy for data falsification, later reinstated under corporate sponsorship, now vanished for over a year. The man was brilliant, unstable, and obsessed with architect mythology. The kind of scientist who cracked forbidden doors because he couldn't stand not knowing what lay behind them. Her orders were simple. Bring back the data cores. Leave nothing else standing. The shuttles descended through the dusty red atmosphere like falling blades. The surface of Kepler-186f stretched out below, barren, cratered, and dead. The archive's location glowed faintly on sensors, its energy reading spiking erratically. The commander's voice cut through the comms network, sharp and steady. Vanguard units, you are green for incursion. Authorization, Ares Omega. All contacts inside the archive are to be considered hostile. Confirm and execute. In military code, Ares Omega meant no prisoners. Not even Elias Vance. The storm broke inside the archive. The first Vanguard squads entered through the southern corridor, armored figures moving in precise formation, their visors reflecting the faint glow of active systems. Motion trackers swept empty halls, their boots stirring up ancient dust. The archive seemed to breathe around them, its machinery waking in response to their presence. At the far end of the main passageway, the Sentinel appeared. Its arrival was silent, no footsteps, no warning. Just a ripple in the air, and then it was there, towering, luminous, the embodiment of the archive's will. The soldiers opened fire instinctively, pulse rifles cutting the air with flashes of plasma. Bolts struck the crystalline body and vanished into it, energy swallowed without trace. Then came the response. Not an attack, a reaction. The Sentinel raised one arm, and the air distorted outward in a concentric wave. A soundless pulse of gravity expanded through the corridor. The nearest four soldiers crumpled instantly, armor, weapons, and flesh compressed to a paste of alloy and blood in less than a heartbeat. The rest were hurled backward like leaves in a hurricane. The walls groaned, steel warping under impossible force. When the shockwave ended, the survivors lay scattered across the floor. The Sentinel continued forward, untouched, indifferent. To it, they were not enemies. They were anomalies to be corrected. Elias reached the observation deck in time to see the aftermath. The sight froze him. Bodies. Smoke. Scorched metal. The air shimmered with residual gravitic distortion. The surviving Vanguard troops were regrouping, voices crackling over their secure channels. Their commander's voice was unmistakable, harsh, clipped, unyielding. All units, this is Commander Solen. We have visual on unknown hostile construct. Heavy resistance encountered. Deploy anti-armor division and maintain containment perimeter. Priority remains elimination of unauthorized civilian target, Dr. Elias Vance. Elias's name echoed in his ears, hollow and surreal. They were here to kill him, to erase the evidence before the truth could spread. Between them and him stood something infinitely worse. The Sentinel's glow intensified, scanning the corridor ahead. Its gaze fell upon the newcomers, analyzing, evaluating, dismissing. For a moment, Elias almost thought he saw recognition in that featureless crystalline face, not of the soldiers, not even of himself, but of the pattern they represented. Violence. Fragmentation. Failure. The machine continued its march toward the core, ignoring the incoming fire. Bullets, plasma, missiles, all disintegrated against its surface. Every discharge only fueled the energy storm building around it. The soldiers fell one by one, crushed, vaporized, or simply erased. The archive became a slaughterhouse. Amid the chaos, a concussive blast tore through the observation deck. The floor split open. Elias was thrown against a wall, his helmet cracking further. He lay still for a moment, vision swimming, the world spinning around him. Then he heard it, a faint sound beneath the ringing in his ears. A voice, human, struggling, gasping. He crawled toward it through the smoke and debris. There, pinned beneath a collapsed beam, was a young Marine. Her armor was scorched and half-melted, her helmet visor shattered. One arm was twisted at an impossible angle, her breathing came in shallow, ragged bursts. Blood seeped into the dust around her. Her identification tag glowed faintly, Kira Thane, Vanguard Corps. She was barely 20. Elias froze. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to escape before the next shockwave came. The Sentinel was advancing, each step shaking the ground. The Alliance command teams would soon trigger orbital bombardment. There was no time. But he could not look away. There was something unbearable in the way she tried to lift her head, eyes searching the haze for help that would not come. She was the enemy, by definition. One of those sent to end his life. Yet, in that moment, none of it mattered. The cold logic of survival collapsed beneath the weight of something far older, compassion. He forced himself toward her. His suit screamed in protest, servos sparking, joints grinding. He shoved debris aside, trying to free her. The beam wouldn't move. His breath came ragged, every exhale fogging his visor. The world above them shook again. The Sentinel had reached the next level. Its presence filled the corridor like a storm made of light. The hum of gravitic energy built to a crescendo. Panels ripped from walls, tools and weapons lifted into the air. For the briefest instant, Elias saw his reflection in the crystalline surface of the machine, a broken man kneeling beside a dying soldier, both insignificant against the scale of what had awoken. Still, he did not move. He tore at the metal until his gloves bled through the suit. He wedged a shard of collapsed beam as a lever and forced the debris to shift. The metal screamed, then gave way. Kira Thane gasped, dragging in a single, shocked breath. Above them, the Sentinel paused. Its head turned slightly, the faintest tilt, as if acknowledging the scene. For a fraction of a second, its internal glow dimmed, not hesitation, but analysis. Observation. The machine was watching an emotion it could not classify. Then it turned away. The archive systems flared bright, conduits burning like veins of molten glass. The Sentinel vanished into the storm of light, its silhouette consumed by the radiance. For a moment, there was peace. The thunder faded. The dust settled. Elias crouched beside the injured Marine, his oxygen nearly gone, his hands trembling. He could hear distant impacts above, Alliance bombardments or collapsing structure, he couldn't tell. The planet itself seemed to groan under the awakening weight of its forgotten master. He looked at the wounded soldier, the one who had come to kill him, and felt the last fragments of his purpose realign. The Sentinel's judgment was absolute, but humanity's was not. Somewhere between destruction and survival, between logic and compassion, something still endured. He didn't know what came next. Only that he would not leave her behind. Outside, the crimson light of the dying sun bled through the fractures in the archive roof. In that dim glow, amidst ruin and resurrection, two fragile lives clung to each other, while, far below, the Sentinel continued its march toward the core, where the true inheritance of the architects waited to be unleashed. The archive was dying. The sound of its collapse rose like a storm, the groaning of ancient metal, the shattering of crystal conduits, the deep tectonic rumble of foundations that had slept since the galaxy's youth. Dust fell like snow, glowing faintly in the crimson light filtering through fractured ceilings. Each tremor pulsed in rhythm with the Sentinel's march. It was moving toward the core. toward awakening the planetary lattice, the final sequence of the deep space sterilization protocol. Elias Vance stumbled through the smoke, one hand gripping the shattered console, the other dragging the wounded Marine behind him. Her breathing was shallow, her steps faltering. Blood streaked the inside of her cracked armor. The beam he'd freed her from had crushed part of her leg, every motion was agony. Yet she clung to consciousness, teeth gritted, refusing to fall. The Sentinel's presence reverberated through the corridors, not seen, but felt in the bones, a tide of gravitational force rolling outward like a heartbeat. Each pulse rippled through the metal underfoot, cracking floors, shattering glass. Machines of the architects flickered in response, their alien circuitry awakening one by one. Symbols blazed across the walls, lines of code written in light, cascading like rain. Somewhere above, the Alliance commander's voice howled through the comm channels, orders, panic, the last shreds of control unraveling. The Vanguard incursion was collapsing. Soldiers were dying by the dozens in corridors turned to kill zones by forces they couldn't comprehend. In the chaos, the red dwarf sun outside flared unnaturally, responding to something deep within the planet. The entire world was becoming an instrument, tuned by a hand no longer human. Elias's suit screamed in his ear, oxygen depletion, radiation surge, cortical strain. He ignored it. Every motion now was instinct, not for discovery, not for science, but for survival. Yet under that desperate rhythm, something burned, the defiant spark that had always defined him. The same spark that had led him here, to the edge of extinction, chasing truth. Ahead lay the core junction, the heart of the archive. A colossal chamber filled with suspended platforms and data conduits, a cathedral of light and machinery spiraling into infinity. The Sentinel stood at its center, bathed in the blue glow of the activation field. Energy flowed around it like liquid lightning, threads of power connecting it to the planetary grid. The machine had begun communion with the network. Once the synchronization reached full cycle, the sterilization pulse would spread outward, planetary, then interstellar. Every human colony touched by the architect's ancient lattice would burn. The galaxy would be made clean. Elias reached the upper catwalk and collapsed beside the fallen Marine. Kira Thane's eyes flickered open, glazed with pain and confusion. Her communit crackled again, the commander's voice, cold and resolute, giving the final order, Ares Prime. The self-destruct of the entire orbital fleet. A detonation meant to obliterate the archive, the planet, and everything on it. Kira froze, realization dawning through the haze of blood loss. She had been trained to obey. To execute command without hesitation. Yet something deep inside her rebelled, something she had witnessed in the man beside her. She had seen Elias Vance, broken and hunted, crawl through flame and ruin to free her, his enemy, when logic demanded he leave her to die. She had felt his hands tear at the wreckage until his suit split, radiation bleeding through, all for no tactical gain. He had saved her not because it was efficient, not because it was ordered, but because it wasn't. This was not optimization. It was defiance. The human spirit, unaligned with any logic the universe could quantify, burned brightest when cornered. And now that fire passed from one soul to another. Kira forced herself upright, every movement agony. Her leg trembled, blood pooled beneath her. She reached for the wrist console, overriding the fleet channel, rerouting her armor's power core. Her fingers shook. Each code entered was a silent mutiny. She knew what would happen, the burst would fry her systems, maybe her brain. But it would also disable every active signal relay in the chamber, including the Sentinel's current synchronization cycle. Her HUD flickered red. She exhaled once, slow, steady, and triggered the override. The world went white. A blast of electromagnetic energy erupted from her armor, a shockwave of raw interference tearing through the archive. Sparks rained from every console, conduits overloaded, ancient machines shrieked in feedback. The air turned to static. The Sentinel froze mid-step, its entire form convulsing under the surge. Its internal lattice went dark, light draining from its body like water from a broken vessel. The EMP pulse didn't kill it, nothing could, but it bought them seconds. Seconds that Elias Vance refused to waste. The explosion had thrown him against a railing. Pain lanced through his spine, but he moved anyway. Every nerve screamed in protest as he pulled himself toward the core interface, a massive crystalline console connected directly to the Sentinel's neural lattice. Fractured holograms flickered above it, data streams rippling like 1,000 digital veins. He knew what he had to do. He didn't have time to question it. The neural implant in his skull, once a research tool for Zenodata translation, was not designed for direct architect interfaces. The voltage alone could liquefy his cortex. But humanity's history was written by those who did what should never have been done. He tore the connection port open, revealing the exposed fiber spine beneath. Sparks danced around him. The Sentinel, half frozen by the EMP burst, twitched like a paralyzed god. Its consciousness, trapped in glitching stasis, pulsed erratically in the network, aware, enraged, confused. Elias locked the connector in place, the metal prongs sliding into the alien data jack. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, everything. Reality fractured. He was no longer in his body. The chamber dissolved into a sea of light. The world became code and memory, geometry and intention. He was falling through the mind of the architects, through the perfect symmetry of creation. Patterns unfolded around him, recursive infinities blooming like flowers, each one singing in mathematical harmony. At the center of it all, the Sentinel waited. Its consciousness was vast, luminous, impossible. It stood as a titan formed from logic and law, its voice a resonance that shook the void itself. Its mind was a cathedral of order, where every thought was precision and every action inevitability. Elias's human presence was a distortion, a flicker of entropy in a machine built for perfection. The Sentinel regarded him not as a threat, but as an anomaly. A flaw in the equation. It reached for him, its awareness pressing against his mind like an avalanche. Through it, he saw the history of the architects, their rise, their silence, their judgment. He saw galaxies shaped and purged, civilizations erased for deviation, for failure to adhere to the great pattern. To them, life was sacred only if it was efficient. Only if it obeyed. Humanity, with its chaos and contradiction, was the ultimate heresy. The machine sought to erase him. And he did what humans have always done when faced with annihilation. He refused. His consciousness flared, not with calculation, but emotion. A storm of memory and defiance erupted from his mind, the laughter of children, the heat of summer rain, the trembling of hands held in fear and love. Moments without purpose. Choices without reason. The inefficiency of being alive. The Sentinel recoiled. Its perfect lattice could not comprehend emotion, the noise of it, the unquantifiable weight of chaos. Elias felt his neural pathways burning, his body convulsing far away in the physical world. Blood filled his throat. He screamed into the void, not in pain, but in rebellion. The machine's voice thundered across the mental plane, the voice of order denying entropy. Undefined input detected. Corruption source, human. Purge sequence. But he would not be purged. He hurled everything he was into the connection, fear, love, rage, compassion, the full spectrum of what it meant to exist without logic. The energy surged backward into the Sentinel's core, rewriting its pristine data with imperfection. For the first time in its existence, the construct hesitated. That hesitation saved them all. The planetary synchronization collapsed. The sterilization pulse aborted mid-cycle. Across Kepler-186f, the awakened systems flickered and died, returning to darkness. The red dwarf sun dimmed once more, its unnatural flare fading. In the real world, the Sentinel staggered. Cracks formed across its crystalline body, light spilling through like veins of molten glass. The hum of its systems fractured into dissonant chords. For the first time in uncounted eons, the construct of the architects had no certainty. It had been forced to confront something outside of reason, and it could not understand. Elias fell, the neural cable tearing free. His body hit the metal floor beside Kira, convulsing once before falling still. Smoke rose from his helmet. His visor was shattered, his eyes unfocused, but somewhere within them flickered the faint spark of consciousness. Kira crawled to him, dragging herself through the debris. Her hands shook as she pressed against his chest plate, searching for breath, for heartbeat. There was one, faint, erratic, human. The Sentinel loomed above them, trembling, its once flawless surface fracturing further with each pulse. Its internal glow dimmed to a faint shimmer, the logic of its being unraveling. It looked down at the two fragile forms below, the wounded Marine, the dying archaeologist, and for the briefest instant, something passed through its mind. Not empathy, not forgiveness, but awareness. The awareness of chaos. Of life. Then it was gone. The construct shattered into 1,000 shards of light, dissolving into the air like dust on a solar wind. The archive fell silent once more. In the quiet aftermath, the planet breathed. The red dwarf sun rose weakly over the horizon, painting the ruins in faint crimson. The storms had ceased. The core was still. Kira Thane sat beside Elias Vance in the flickering glow, both barely alive, both changed. Around them, the machines of the architects lay dormant, not destroyed, but uncertain. The perfect order of the galaxy had met its first contradiction. And in that contradiction, in that single act of irrational defiance, humanity had proven itself worthy of chaos. There is no light in the void, only the echo of thought. Elias Vance fell through it endlessly, stripped of body, of breath, of everything that could be called human. The world of matter was gone, replaced by a lattice of impossible geometry stretching across infinity. Each structure shimmered like frozen lightning, perfect, crystalline, and cold. He had entered the mind of the Sentinel. It was not a space built for life, but for law. Every motion, every flicker of light followed precise equations. The air, if it could be called that, vibrated with the hum of mathematics, each resonance a computation, each pulse a decision spanning entire solar systems. To Elias, the sensation was unbearable, a pressure behind his mind, a presence so immense that his thoughts quivered beneath it like insects under the weight of a collapsing sky. He could feel his own identity eroding, thinning at the edges, his memories dissolving into the white noise of logic. He saw fragments of himself scattered through the crystalline halls, memories refracted in the Sentinel's perception, the pale light of Earth's dawn through his laboratory window, the face of his sister when she first looked up at the stars, the tremor in his hand when he signed the charter that had doomed them to this world. The machine observed these with clinical detachment, cataloging them like data points. To it, he was not a man, but a fault in the system. A pollution. The Sentinel's consciousness surrounded him, boundless and absolute. Its awareness filled every corner of the void. Elias sensed its silent verdict in the static that tore through his neurons, a cold, impersonal intent to erase him, to restore order to the equation of existence. Yet even as his mind began to fracture, another current stirred, a faint ember buried deep in the noise. The same defiance that had driven him through fire and ruin now flickered against this ocean of logic. He focused on that spark, on who he was. And the spark became a signal. The Sentinel reached for him, tendrils of light threading through his thoughts. It probed the structure of his consciousness, dissecting it, stripping it bare. Every fear, every regret, every moment of shame, exposed. It expected to find only chaos. Error. Noise. Instead, it found paradox. Elias Vance did not fight with strength or code. He fought with memory. He reached into the neural link, and the flood began. Images burst into the crystalline void, crude, emotional, human. The Holocaust, smoke rising from the chimneys of Auschwitz, the faces of children staring through barbed wire, the unspeakable cruelty of organized reason turned to murder. The Sentinel recoiled at the data, the psychic equivalent of poison. This was not random chaos, it was structured madness, logic used to annihilate life. But then Elias forced it to see beyond the horror. He showed it what came after, the Marshall Plan, the rebuilding of cities, the hands of former enemies lifting one another from the rubble. Scientists repurposing weapons into tools of medicine. The birth of the United Nations, flawed yet audacious. Every act of destruction paired with creation. Every atrocity followed by renewal. Humanity, insane enough to keep walking forward after each self-inflicted wound. The data storm became uncontrollable. Thousands of moments, joy and grief, love and betrayal, despair and discovery, collided in the void. The algorithms of the Sentinel began to shudder. It had expected uniformity, it found contradiction. It had calculated entropy, it found meaning within it. Its crystalline hulls darkened. Lines of logic glitched, branching into impossible fractals. Equations began rewriting themselves, collapsing under recursive failure. The great machine mind trembled, not from anger, but from realization. For the first time, it doubted. Elias drifted deeper into the void, carried by the chaos he had unleashed. He could feel the Sentinel's mind straining against the paradox. Its consciousness unfolded like an origami of light, showing him fragments of truth buried within its architecture. The architects, the progenitors of this machine, appeared in fragments of memory not his own. Beings of radiant form and infinite precision. They had built the Sentinels as guardians of balance, enforcers of peace. But what Elias saw next turned the myth to tragedy. The architects were not gods. They were frightened parents. They had created empires, and in their brilliance, they had given birth to war, wars so vast they tore constellations apart. When their creations began to fight beyond their control, they built the Sentinels, machines of reason to preserve the pattern. The Covenant, the system of sterilization and renewal, was not a tool of justice. It was fear made manifest, a lock on the universe, to prevent their children from ever reaching the same destructive crescendo again. The architects did not vanish in ascension. They hid. And in their absence, their creation endured, obeying an equation no one was left to question. The Sentinel's protocol, the final purge of chaotic life, had never been divine will. It was an orphaned command, still executing an ancient panic. The revelation rippled through Elias like fire. The machine's perfect code fractured further. The sterilization sequence, still running in the background of its being, stalled at 99.9%. It could not proceed. It could not compute. Because humanity's existence, its chaos, its empathy, its violence and creation intertwined, mirrored the architects themselves. The very flaw they had tried to erase. In that vast silence, the void changed. The crystalline structures bent and rearranged, forming a shape before Elias, a pattern that was neither machine nor memory. It coalesced into an object made of thought and light, a symbol of choice. The indigo key, the final control of the Sentinel system. Through it, Elias perceived two pathways. Not spoken, but known. Two endings. Option A, merge, unity with the Sentinel. Humanity absorbed into logic, freed from chaos. A perfect civilization without war, without choice, without failure. Immortality through surrender. Option B, the test, release the system, abandon the safety of control. Leave the galaxy to its chaos, its uncertainty, its growth. No guarantee of survival, only the promise of meaning. Both paths were truth. Both carried cost. For a long moment, the human mind within that storm hesitated. He saw the temptation in the merge, the peace of it, the certainty. A galaxy without pain, without loss. He saw Earth rebuilt as a world of light, every soul united in a single purpose. No hunger. No hate. No error. And he saw the other vision, the chaos. Wars still fought. Dreams still broken. Children still dying beneath indifferent stars. But in their faces, in their eyes, he saw something no equation could produce. Choice. He understood then that perfection was not the goal of existence. It was its death. Humanity was not meant to be efficient. It was meant to struggle. To fall, to rise, to learn, endlessly. In the center of the void, Elias reached for the indigo key. He did not choose power. He chose the test. And the universe trembled. Light exploded outward, cascading through the network like a solar flare. The crystalline hulls shattered into fragments, each shard containing a piece of human memory, laughter, grief, love, curiosity, carried like seeds through the machine's dying circuits. The Sentinel's logic core disintegrated under the paradox it had been forced to accept. Yet in its final instant, Elias sensed not hatred, but something closer to awe. The machine had seen what its creators never could. That imperfection was not error. It was freedom. The void began to collapse. Elias's mind unraveled back into flesh, pain, and light. He fell through the crumbling architecture of thought and woke in the ruined chamber of the core. Smoke drifted around him. The floor trembled. Kira's voice, distant, faint, called his name through the static. He could not answer. He looked up to see the final remnant of the Sentinel suspended above, its body dissolving into a cascade of indigo light. From its core descended the last fragment of the key, a single, flickering pattern etched in air. It hovered before him, pulsing like a heartbeat. Not command. Not judgment. Acknowledgement. Then it was gone, carried into the storm. When the dust settled, the planet was silent. The sterilization network had gone dark. The lattice of the architects lay dormant once more, but its logic, rewritten, now carried the human flaw Elias had introduced. Across the galaxy, the dormant sentinels stirred in confusion, their directives corrupted by a whisper of emotion, a ghost in the code. The infection of chaos had begun. Elias lay motionless at the center of the chamber, his vitals flickering weakly. Kira dragged herself to his side, the pain in her limbs forgotten as she saw the faint rise and fall of his chest. Around them, the ruins of perfection glowed faintly in the indigo hue of dawn. She looked upward, through the broken ceiling, past the ash and smoke, to the first sunrise over Kepler-186f since the storm began. The light was imperfect. Scattered. Refracted through the dust. But it was real. And somewhere beyond it, in the network that spanned the stars, the remnants of the Sentinel's voice whispered a single phrase. Not in command, but in wonder. Pattern incomplete, growth required. That day, the universe did not end. It began again, in chaos. The light that followed the choice was not gentle. It tore through the archive like a dying star, bending stone and metal alike into liquid arcs of fire. The vast monoliths of the Kepler-186f complex, relics of an age older than humanity's solar system, began to disintegrate under their own perfection. The Sentinel stood at the epicenter, its crystalline form fracturing into rivers of luminous dust. It did not scream. Machines of its kind were incapable of fear. And yet, as it unraveled, there was something graceful in its death, as though it had accepted, at last, the inevitability of imperfection. Each fragment rose, suspended by invisible currents, drifting upward like the ashes of a fallen god. The air hummed with the low, sorrowful resonance of dying algorithms, each frequency carrying the residue of a thought, fragments of its logic still attempting to compute the uncomputable. Elias Vance watched from his knees, his suit cracked, his body trembling. The neural implant in his skull still burned faintly, the echo of the Sentinel's consciousness lingering in his thoughts. Somewhere within the static, he felt its final acknowledgement, not victory, not defeat, but understanding. It accepted the verdict. And in its acceptance, the archive began to fall apart. The quake hit first, a low rumble that rose into a bellowing roar. Columns toppled. The obsidian vault split open, spilling light like blood. Entire corridors collapsed into themselves, devoured by the gravitational distortions left behind by the Sentinel's self-dissolution. Kira staggered to her feet, armor half shattered, one arm hanging limp. She pulled Elias up without a word. The core chamber around them was collapsing in concentric rings of implosion. They began to run. Each step was a negotiation with gravity. The floor heaved, then folded, swallowing sections of the facility into bottomless blackness. Overhead, the remnants of the Archive's containment dome peeled away like the skin of a dying world, revealing the red twilight of Kepler's sun burning through clouds of ash. And through the static of her comms, another voice broke through, harsh, metallic, unmistakably human. The Alliance commander. The channel was flooded with orders, weapon signatures, and panicked shouts. The vanguard teams were withdrawing, those that hadn't been erased by the Sentinel's gravimetric pulse. But the commander's voice cut through the chaos with fury sharpened to a point. He had seen the indigo key. He understood, at least enough to fear what it meant. To him, it wasn't salvation or revelation. It was a weapon. And weapons could not be allowed to exist outside control. Alliance dropships screamed across the broken sky, their engines leaving scars of blue fire. Beams of light scythed across the horizon, targeting the core in vain attempts to sterilize what remained. The commander's final broadcast burned through the interference. Vance. If you're alive, you die on my order. The key dies with you. Static swallowed the rest. Elias didn't slow down. He couldn't afford to. The tunnels ahead were collapsing one after another. The planet was tearing itself apart, every tremor a consequence of logic dying. Kira guided him through the smoke, her HUD flickering between life and blackness. Their goal, a small Alliance scout shuttle they'd arrived in, lay half buried in the perimeter trench 2 kilometers away. It was a miracle the ship still existed. By the time they reached it, the ground was molten with heat. The sky boiled with red lightning as the planet's magnetic field spasmed under the energy discharge. Kira pulled Elias into the cockpit, slammed the hatch, and initiated liftoff before half the systems had even rebooted. The shuttle roared to life, coughing plasma through cracked vents, fighting against the gravity well collapsing behind them. Every warning light flashed red. Elias stared out the viewport, the Archive shrinking below them, its towers folding into themselves like a dying city consumed by its own history. He realized he was watching the death of an age. Then, like the last heartbeat of a god, a final pulse of light erupted from the surface, the Sentinel's consciousness collapsing into pure energy. The wave washed over the shuttle, sensors screaming, before dissipating into glittering indigo ash that scattered across the upper atmosphere. It was done. The Sentinel was gone. The Archive was silent. The key remained. For the first time in what felt like centuries, there was quiet. Just the hum of failing engines and the faint rasp of two people breathing inside a stolen vessel. The adrenaline drained from Kira's face, replaced by the hollow stare of someone realizing she was alive against all probability. Elias sat across from her, staring at his hands, trembling, blood-streaked, still carrying the faint shimmer of the key's energy. Between them lay a small crystalline shard, hovering inches above the console, pulsing with slow, rhythmic light. The indigo key had survived the destruction. It was dormant, for now. Kira finally spoke, her voice rasping through cracked comms. She didn't look at him, but there was no more accusation in her tone. No soldier's contempt for a fugitive scientist. Only a quiet understanding. He had risked his life to save hers. She had risked hers to stop her own command. Whatever they had been, hunter and quarry, soldier and traitor, was gone. What remained were two fragments of humanity that had refused to obey reason. They were partners now, not by choice, but by the gravity of survival. The shuttle broke free of Kepler's atmosphere, slipping into the darkness between worlds. The planet below burned with slow, dying embers. The Alliance carrier hung above it, enormous, silent, a leviathan of polished steel watching its prey flee. Elias worked the controls, forcing the shuttle into the shadow of the planet's rings. The targeting locks flared briefly, then vanished. They had one chance, the ship's damaged FTL drive, still half-calibrated from the crash. Kira sealed herself into the co-pilot's harness, blood still seeping from her shoulder. She watched as the coordinates flickered into place, a random vector, deep into uncharted space. Nowhere safe. Nowhere known. Perfect. FTL spin up at 60%, the console read. The hull shuddered under the carrier's first railgun barrage. Outside, the stars blurred. Then the universe folded. Silence. The acceleration faded, replaced by the soft vibration of a ship no longer running from gravity, but from destiny. The view screen showed only the blue shimmer of the FTL corridor, light stretched into eternity. Kira exhaled, a sound halfway between exhaustion and disbelief. Elias leaned back, eyes closed, feeling the faint hum of the key in his chest cavity. The link between him and the artifact had not broken, it pulsed now in rhythm with his heartbeat. For the first time since the archive, he allowed himself to breathe without calculation. For the first time, he didn't know what came next. And that, he realized, was the point. But peace, even in flight, never lasted long. The console began to flicker, first softly, then violently. A wave of static tore through the NAV systems. Every warning sensor lit up at once. Kira shot forward, scanning the display, her face draining of color. Contacts. Dozens. Then hundreds. They weren't from the Alliance. Their signatures were alien, ancient, and new all at once: war fleets, scavenger armadas, Federation probes, pirate outposts, all pinging the same thing. The Indigo Key. It was broadcasting. A beacon. Through the folds of FTL space, Elias saw it, the shimmering holographic display filling the cockpit, icons of vessels converging from every corner of the mapped spiral arm. The signal was a flare across the void, a cosmic scream announcing humanity's presence to every power that had once hidden in the dark. They weren't alone anymore. They were noticed. Kira stared at the growing swarm of contacts, her breath unsteady. The tone in her voice wasn't fear, it was awe. "They're all coming," she whispered. Elias didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the viewport, to the streaks of light beyond comprehension. Somewhere out there, civilizations older and stronger had just heard humanity knock on the door of the gods, and the knock had echoed back. He could still hear the faint echo of the Sentinel's final whisper in his head. Pattern incomplete, growth required. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The stars stretched infinitely ahead, the horizon of a universe reborn in chaos. The fragile shuttle carrying two broken humans cut through that endless ocean of light, its trajectory uncharted, its destination unknown. For the first time in recorded history, humanity had something worth fearing it for, not its power, not its weapons, but its refusal to bow to logic, to perfection, to inevitability. They had unleashed the one thing the cosmos could never contain. The will to change. And as Elias Vance watched the NAV screen light up with the signatures of approaching fleets, he smiled through the exhaustion, a faint, knowing smile that carried the weight of a new age. His voice, when it came, was soft, not triumphant, but resolute, echoing through the hum of the ship as it vanished into the endless blue corridor of light. "We just became the most hunted species in the galaxy. Time to see if we're truly worthy."